Needless to say, the first roster change period has provided a ton of emotions, from player trades to roster rumors and a ton of speculation overall. You don't really know who to trust, right? There's a ton of rumors going around out there as to whose fault necessarily trades that we're seeing right now. Whose fault is it exactly? Because you're always going to hear different sides to different stories. So I don't even want to get into a discussion as for whose fault it is regarding these changes. Is it the owners? Is it the players necessarily for not reading through their contracts enough, for not doing enough research into the organizations that they're signing with? And I'll be honest with you, you could both make arguments that, hey, maybe both of them should be changed up. Maybe both of them should have done things differently. So I'm not changing that up by any means. But this is the way that I look at it. And for the record, let me be very, very clear in terms of owners and players, because anything that falls under the CWL handbook as a violation gives full right to the CWL and whoever else to come in and to add disciplinary actions if needed. So anything that warrants a violation obviously can deserve the blame in regards to certain situations. But for me, the issue behind all of these changes, the issue behind all of these roster changes, players being dropped, organizations under fire, is because of the format that is in play right now. Like I said, excluding violations of the CWL handbook, because that is a totally different topic that can totally segue and act as its own video. But for me, at the beginning of the season, when it was announced teams could make unlimited changes, I, on record, said multiple times, even on this show, this will not work. This is not a good idea. You're giving organizations too much power. This isn't a good idea. Now, the format this year has given organizations franchise power in a non-franchised system. And I was told, Landon, the reason why they're doing this is because they're preparing for franchising. They are getting ready for franchising next year. That's why they're trying to do this. Don't you understand that they're trying to do franchising next year? And this will continue to be my response. This will continue to be my argument. We aren't in franchising yet. In a franchise model, the organizations have the power. Well, why is that? Because they earned it. Well, how did they earn it? Because they paid for it. The Chicago Bulls, the New York Yankees can make whatever changes they see fit because why? They paid for the position. They earned the position by paying for it. Now, the issue now is that the players rightfully earned the spot. The players were the ones who went to the PLQ, and they, for me at least, rightfully deserve the position. They rightfully deserve at least some sort of freedom when it comes down to these roster change periods. Organizations were given power over something that they really didn't rightfully earn, in my opinion. Now, do I have a problem with organizations having power in general? Absolutely not, right? Because I don't think that that's necessarily the case. What I am arguing, what my big problem is that they were given too much power. So I wouldn't have had any issues if we would have come up with a simple 3 to 4 player man rule. This is what I was kind of arguing and what my particular stance was, because I feel if you are going to argue something, it would be nice to kind of obviously try to provide a little bit of context into what you feel would be a good system to have in play instead of it. So for me, I think we should have orchestrated the 3 to 4 man rule, which pretty much we've had this in the past, and I don't understand why this wasn't fully taken into consideration, considering what we have now. Organizations, let's say you must keep 3, if not 4 players on the original lineup that qualified. And you have to keep those 3 to 4 players throughout the entirety of the season. So you can make changes, but you have to keep at least 3, or you have to keep at least 4 original players from the team that qualified through the POQ or through CWL Vegas, if you're talking about the top 4. But by no means does that change everything. I want to make sure that's clear. That does not change everything. But I think in regards to these total roster change-ups that we are seeing with Midnight and EXG and a whole lot of other situations and rosters that have been formed through those organizations, I think that would have definitely removed a lot of it from being somewhat of a possibility. And I will say, never in my life was I in support of teams like Team Space or Team Sween going into the PLQ and intentionally not representing an organization. Now, the reason why I respect that and the reason why I was in favor of it is because they then had the power, right? Those players of Team Space and Team Sween, if Team Sween would have qualified, but we're talking about Team Space in this situation, they had the power to choose whatever organization they wanted. They had the power, and they pretty much were the only team who made it through who had the rights to do whatever they felt fit. They had the rights to do whatever they wanted. And you could obviously argue, like denial possibly as well. But regardless, though, never, like I said, in my life was I in support of teams like Team Space or Team Sween until the PLQ, when I realized that unlimited roster changes could be a thing. And they did that for security, right? They did that so they couldn't, at least initially, make the decisions. Now, I think the current format works for a franchise system. I will say that. I think the current system that we have in play works for a franchise system. I will say that it's kind of missing a few components with stable and necessary contracts. The ability for players who are, like I said, trying to sell and whatnot. And I think for me, along with stable contracts and brands that could be associated with the league, I think that we would also need an administration to make sure that players could be safe, to make sure that they're, not necessarily having any issues as far as the organization is considered. So I think there are still pieces that we're missing, despite us trying to enter into franchised a year ahead of schedule. I think the system somewhat makes sense, but it's still, we're trying to become a franchise system when we are not a franchise league as of yet. And I think personally the CWL intended for a lot more major organizations to get in. I think that they were hoping that we would see, maybe major organizations qualify, or if that these younger organizations or smaller orgs would have qualified, that they would have probably sold off to teams like CLG, TSM, etc., who were interested. But I think they put this system in hopes that these organizations would make it in to act in some way as sort of a test run, right? Like, hey, TSM, hey, CLG, you guys can buy rosters, and hey, it's kind of like an open house. Like, hey, you guys can kind of do whatever you want to here. This is going to be your opportunity. You guys can make as many changes as you want to, for the most part, right? And you guys can kind of format your roster heading into what will be franchising next year. That's kind of what we're seeing with Gen G. Gen G is probably one of the only teams who was added this year after never being in Call of Duty in the past, or at least as of recently, who kind of got in and got to do not necessarily whatever they wanted, but are kind of getting their feet wet in regards to possibly being in franchising next year. I think that they were thinking, let's allow these brands to see what it's like, how Call of Duty works. Essentially what they were doing was kind of acting as a color dealer and saying, you know what, how does this car feel? In hopes that they would possibly be interested in trying to purchase it and have it go off the lot. But so for me, let's kind of throw it to this. Can the blame be sent to a few other factors? Can it be sent to, like I said, the organizations? Can it be sent to the players for not reading the contract? I definitely think in terms of violations to the CWL handbook, it can be possible, right? I think that there definitely can be a situation where you look at that and you say, okay, that's where the problem lies. But for me, this goes back to the day that spoof was dropped. This goes back to the day that unlimited changes were introduced. Because of this pretty much has allowed everything else to occur. Everything else has come from this in regards to unlimited changes, in regards to the format. But don't get it twisted, right? Don't get it twisted. I'm not giving a pass and saying it's the organization, or it's not the organization's fault. I'm not saying it isn't the player's fault either. But I will say, I don't think we would be having this discussion right now if the format was different.